Hey everyone, in this video I want to talk a bit about kit. Kit for me has three main parts. You have clothing, sleeping and luggage to carry all the stuff with you. Bike is going to be separate from this kit and we're just talking about stuff that you might wear or use. Kit can obviously get very expensive very quickly, and so I think it's important to first of all sort of set a budget for what you have to spend. Either you can keep using stuff you already have or you can perhaps look second hand. And once you set a budget either for particular pieces or overall, you can go from there. Obviously we'll look at our analysis first, and that comes forward into sort of determining what sort of kit we might need. Having looked at the location that we're going to, we're going to know what the weather's going to be like. Having looked at the terrain, we're going to kind of know what sort of kit we need as well. We're going to know if we need to sleep outside or if we can sleep inside, how cold it be, if it might rain. And this will determine a lot of things of what you might want to take. When looking at kit personally, there are three things that I look for, and these are in order of how I look for them. First of all is performance. This is the most important thing. If it doesn't perform, it's no use. Secondly, packability. It might perform incredibly well, but if it's absolutely massive, you can't take it with you. We're bike packing after all, not car camping. Thirdly is weight, and weight for me is the least important. If it performs well and it's packable, I don't really mind what it weighs. And generally, if it is packable, the weight is going to be less. And sometimes, in order to have the performance you need from an item, you need to sacrifice and carry a heavier weight. Overall, when selecting kit, I don't look at weight. It's the last thing, and I generally don't even weigh the bike. As long as it performs and I can pack it, I don't mind. Okay? Clothing. One of the most important parts in clothing is waterproofs. Now, if you don't have the right waterproofs, you're not going to be able to keep moving when the weather changes. There are different types of waterproofs. Obviously, you've got jackets, trousers, and different degrees of waterproof ratings, and I'd suggest you read up on those. One of the things to consider is whether you're just going to be crossing Europe and perhaps some 2,000 meter passes in summer, or whether you're going to be in Kyrgyzstan or South America or so forth in winter, because what you're going to need is a lot different. I picked out a couple of waterproofs quite briefly, because they're both rated, and these are from Enduro, they're both rated the same waterproof rating, more or less, effectively. However, the material is quite different and the packability is quite different. This one's lighter weight sort of material, thinner, a bit less functionality, but is half the weight of this bigger MT500 one, and the packability is a lot better on this as well. Now, depending where you're going, you probably want to pick one of these two. They're both going to perform more or less well enough, but where you're going and the warmth that you need, because obviously this slightly thicker material is going to keep you warmer, are things to think about. Another one I wanted to show you briefly was insulation. This is the jacket that I took to Kyrgyzstan. Huge insulation jacket, perfect when it's -10, absolutely unnecessary in Europe. And this is a lot more something that you'd be taking to Europe, so it's a lot thinner insulation and smaller weight. Now both of these are actually synthetic insulation rather than down insulation, and I've moved towards synthetic insulation nowadays because even if it gets a bit damp, it is going to perform better. And when you're racing for 8 days, it's pretty much accepted that down is going to get wet or moist at some point. And I do remember in many races seeing races hanging out down material. So look at the type of insulation as well. Another one is obviously like what you're going to be wearing every day. And you need to think about the comfort of those items and their performance. So if you're going for sort of polyester materials, are they going to start stinking and stretching? If you're going for merino materials, they might not, but they might not be quite as comfortable, might be different weights. So you need to think about that. Shoes, your feet are going to swell. So what works for you on sort of a 6-hour ride might not work after 4 or 5 days. And you need to think about that as well, the straps and the dials and things, and how it closes and adjustments on that, because you are going to want to adjust things. And you might want to wear thicker socks at night time because it's going to be colder as well. And you might want to be covering up your feet. Coming on to sleeping systems, I already just briefly discussed synthetic insulation versus down insulation. For sleeping bags, obviously synthetic insulation is a lot less packable. However, you know, it's going to be less susceptible to becoming wet. In Kyrgyzstan, I took a down sleeping bag. It was, 1,000 power because I wanted to have something that was rated down to about -10, -15. And one of the points there is that I was considering the worst case scenario, at night time it could have been down to -15, and I want to be able to stay dry and warm. Obviously, then you need shelter. If you're racing across Europe, you might be able to stay in hotels. If you're racing in Kyrgyzstan, you're going to need some shelter to sleep out in. You can either be selecting a tent or a bivvy or nothing, depending on the weather conditions. I actually opted for a tent in Kyrgyzstan because I wanted to be secure for the worst case scenario in case I was stuck in the middle of nowhere and my bike had broken. I now have bivvies as well, and this is a Cuban fiber bivvy, and obviously it weighs about 200 grams and is really small. So there is the option to get things really small, light and packable, but obviously budget constraints, and this is very expensive. It's not possible for everyone. The final thing with this is luggage. So you've selected all this stuff you think you're going to need. You've got everything you need and nothing more, and now you need to carry it around with you. And if you saw my pictures from Kyrgyzstan, I was fully loaded on the bike and I had a backpack as well. So I was carrying everything I needed and nothing less. Now, I'm lucky enough to have Rujan making me some of the nicest bags, and obviously different types of materials. This is a bikepacking saddle bag, but it's made from Dynama, which is really lightweight, but it's not quite as robust and durable as this trilaminate material that I have the same bag made from. Now you need to be thinking about the sort of terrain and places you're going and the conditions you might be experiencing. You know, if it's a short race in pretty good conditions, Cuban fiber might just be fine. But if it's a really long race over multiple, perhaps even weeks in terrible conditions, you might want to go for a slightly thicker, more robust material. Or if you want your items to last a bit longer, it might be worthwhile as well. One other consideration is multiple dry bags. So again, I've got the same Dynama and trilaminate dry bags, but then I also put internal dry bags inside of my external dry bags as a sort of double dry bag. Because the last thing you want is your kit getting wet, because if it gets wet, it's not going to work. Now, I'm aware of the length of this video, and I could be talking to you all day long, but I think that leaves it about there. You've got the main factors to consider. First, performance, then packability, and really, it doesn't matter what it weighs if the first two work. Because as long as you've got performance, you're going to be able to keep going whatever the conditions, okay? And that's what's important, not what it weighs. We'll leave it there. If you have any questions, then get in touch, and I'm sure I've got loads more of helpful advice I could give you. Cheers.